The Memphis Grizzlies are open to trading Ja Morant. If you were the GM of any team, would you be trying to get this guy? Welcome on to I don't know, probably end up being like 8-70, something like that. We'll see how close that prediction actually hews to what we're gonna do today. We're gonna do half of the West today, half tomorrow. Danny, I got to get to the Warriors versus Hawks game later today, so we're a little bit truncated in the amount of time that we have. But let's begin here, Danny, with the Denver Nuggets, as they have been without Nikola Jokic now for about 2 weeks.
It's a fascinating team to talk about, and it provides a different lens for them. The Nuggets, 25-13 on the season, 7-7 since the last 15-60. Their the plus five cleaning the glass net rating is seventh in the league. They are first in offense still. They are 24th in defense now, and ESPN's BPI projects them to win 51 games, which would be the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and they've had a couple of nice wins. They won in Boston. They won in Philly without Jamal Murray and basically and Aaron Gordon. I think Christian Braun as well. When Jalen Pickett went crazy, they won that one in overtime. Pickett hit a ton of step backs, which was not what I thought he was known for, but apparently in this game he was. And the defense was good enough to hold on Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid at the end. Philly was actually pretty whole in that game. So that was a disappointing loss to the Sixers, but Nuggets, every win that they can get without Nikola Jokic is great. Also lost to Brooklyn in that time frame, and then Murray and Spencer Jones both missed Friday's game. Murray was actually probable, and then due to an illness and an ankle sprain, didn't play against the Hawks. Overall, though, some troubling signs for the offense in their last 2 games against Boston. Despite winning, they shot the shit out of it in that game. They were 7 of 14 at the rim in that game, which is obviously this is team rim when Jokic is in there. And then only 10 of 18 without Murray, admittedly, against the Atlanta Hawks in that one. So that was Friday. They haven't played since then. We also didn't see, I guess we did see Aaron Gordon come off the bench. That's what he's been doing. Christian Braun has been starting. Braun has played 3 games since coming back. In those 3 games, he is 3 of 14 from the field in about 27 minutes per game. And he's taken 5 3-point attempts in 3 games. Now, he certainly is, you might say, more dependent on Jokic for some of those quick outlets, some of his cutting, his finishing at the rim, but he's been ineffective since returning. It's noteworthy in comparison to Peyton Watson, who had 25 points and it was actually +2 in that 23-point loss to the Hawks at home on Friday. And Peyton Watson has been great. The decision to extend Braun at a $25 million per year number and not really, it seems, engage on Watson is not looking amazing right now. Braun, coming off a pretty severe ankle sprain, though, it can take a while to get back from those. So this isn't the be all end all for what Christian Braun is going to be. He's been very effective for them in the past, but as of right now, he is struggling. So a big dynamic that happened in the last 2 games that Jamal Murray played was he had 16 and 17 assists. And so, Dan, I thought this was pretty interesting in light of some of the discussions that we've had, because you and I haven't really seen him as that sort of an initiator prior to this point.
And it's a different. I brought up the idea in the intro of like this is a different lens because when Jokic is not available at all, that is a different overall calculation than Jokic not being on the floor but being in the game, being available, that sort of stuff. And so that is really encouraging for Jamal Murray for the season now, and fueled by these games, of course. He has the highest assist per 36 of his career, and that should continue to grow with more games without Jokic there. And encouragingly, also highest assist per 36 of his career, but also not a significantly higher turnover rate. So this is going to be a really good window into what a Jamal Murray led team could be, which we just haven't really gotten due to Jokic's remarkable durability.
Yeah, it's worth noting too that they're pretty limited, obviously, not only with Jokic being out, but they don't have a lot of shooting, and they really don't have any other ball handlers either. And I think the Nets game, when Murray did have 16 assists, the Nets largely controlled that one, in part because Denver couldn't stop anybody, but more so because Brooklyn is one of the highest pressuring teams in the league. And while Denver is particularly given Jamal Murray's huge role now, doesn't want him facing that kind of pressure. He's not going to blow by guys in the backcourt. He's been vulnerable to that. We saw back in that playoff series against Minnesota in 2024, for example. And you don't want him getting tired out bringing the ball up, but they don't really have anyone else to do that. Bruce Brown really is just not the same player that he was. Christian Brown isn't really going to do that. Maybe you don't want to give that to Aaron Gordon. That's how he hurt his hamstring, was trying to bring the ball up in the past. Peyton Watson, maybe he could do it, but and Jalen Pickett is probably not going to start alongside Murray in some of these lineups. So and Pickett also is vulnerable to the same thing. He's kind of a bring it up back to goal kind of guys. They don't have anyone who's just going to get the pressure off by blowing by guys in the backcourt. And the Nets, it was a perfect example for the Nets of what they wanted to do in that game. And then though they started really double teaming a lot as well on Murray, because they felt like getting the ball out of his hands would be useful. And as I started watching the film, I watched Boston first, but then Brooklyn. We'll start with Brooklyn. Is I was just really impressed by what I was seeing. It's rare that I will watch something and really get excited about it at this point in my career. It's like, oh, I'm seeing something from a guy that I haven't seen before. And some of these passes were really great. I mean, I would say he started to get the feel of these games, because Boston kind of did the same thing of trying to blitz him more as well, particularly if he got into a more uh, advantageous matchup. So part of what Denver is trying to do now is using Murray as the screener, getting a smaller player onto him, then getting him into the short post with a live dribble. I shouldn't say short post, but like a maybe 18-foot area with a live dribble where he can ISO, and then their teams are usually double teaming him out of that. And some of the passes that he's thrown out of that action have been awesome, where he stays on the ball, takes a couple of dribbles, but he's not doing the dribble backwards and then throw it over two sets of hands move. He'll actually try to attack off of those plays, get those double team guys moving, and that then creates a passing angle for him, tilts the defense. He had a couple of great passes to Zeke Naji, ducking in like almost Jokic like, to where he wasn't really open if you just draw an X next to the O, but Najee kind of had inside position and Murray just found it right inside. It was really quite excellent. He had a couple of blow bys and lay downs for Aaron Gordon. He's got this signature pass now, which he's been doing before, where he'll get up in the air and then throw a backhanded bounce pass across the lane to a guy for a dunk on the other side as he's in the air and he's gotten the defense committee. He can do that with both his right and his left hand. He's done that in the last couple of games. So I was really impressed by what Murray was able to do. Now, in the Boston game, Denver was 7 of 14 at the rim. 6 of those were assisted, and 4 of them were by Murray. So the Boston strategy was, we're going to make Denver shoot the ball, and they did. Murray had 10 of his assists on 3-pointers, but I thought he did a great job using his size to find skip passes to the weak side. Another play where he drove along the baseline against the double team, help came over, then he was able to throw it to the top. That's always a tough pass, going along the baseline, throwing it to the top, because it's not really with your momentum. And so he was setting up a ton of threes in the Boston game. That's what they were giving up. He was taking advantage of that. And then against Brooklyn, he had 16 assists, and 12 of those assists were for baskets at the rim. I mean, that is a
Wow.
crazy number to assist at the rim. And because I thought what it was going to be is like, okay, they're double teaming him and he's just going to throw it to a shooter. That guy's going to shoot it. It's not going to be that impressive. But no, he actually was really making plays for his teammates. And again, I think what I liked the most was his patience against the double team. And, he'll turn it over every once in a while, but to not be forced out of being aggressive by a double team, to continue to stay on the ball, take a couple of dribbles, force the defense 4-on-3. Something's going to come open, particularly if it's something at the rim, and to keep his momentum moving forward against the double team. And then that way, then you can throw passes to somebody under the rim. Whereas if you're backing up, it's really hard to throw that. It's probably going to get picked off. So I was just really impressed by what I saw from Murray, and maybe teams will have to adjust a little bit and not be as aggressive against him because of this passing that he's shown. Now, worth noting that Brooklyn won that game fairly easily still, but again, I think that was more of a defensive issue for the Nuggets. So really liking what I'm seeing from Murray. This is, I would say, the best stretch of his career without Jokic on the floor. There haven't been many of them to where he really has looked like someone who can be the leader of an offense in a way that we've long criticized him for because he just hasn't been effective in that role.
And it's going to be a notable stretch for the Nuggets because they're what they have remaining. They've had they've had a couple good wins, they've had a couple rough losses. Is that they play mostly home games against mostly like okay teams, and so that's the type of thing that if Jamal Murray's playing well, if they could get some of these guys, they can maybe make some headway, maybe keep things keep their standing closer than they would have before. So they have 2 games in the rest of January against the Bucks, 2 against the Wizards, and then they also have New Orleans, Dallas, Charlotte, the Lakers. That's the kind of the main crux of their upcoming schedule. And almost all of those games are at home. They have 3 on the road in the next little bit. Most of them are at home. And so, and they aren't, those classic pressuring teams. You've heard the Bucks in this, you heard the Wizards. Like those aren't defensive pressure teams. So it'll be very interesting to see how Jamal Murray can fare.
Yeah, and Aaron Gordon is still coming off the bench. Seems like he's on about a 25-minute limit, and their number one goal, of course, is to get him to the playoffs whole as well, with all the muscle injuries that he's dealt with, the repeated calf strains last year, the hamstring in the playoffs, this hamstring as well that kept him out for more than a month. But Gordon and Murray, they don't want to. Also, David Adelman said, "I don't want to play Aaron Gordon at center," so it's been a lot of Najee, who Najee's had some decent moments. Like maybe he can emerge again in extended playing time. The other thing that always killed Najee was just he would always start to play well and then just get hurt. That wasn't really the case the last couple of years, but early in his career, it looked like he could contribute more. Jaron Holmes, yeah, basically all we've seen from him is just being able to shoot the ball. A couple of those Murray assists were for him on pretty decent footwork plays by Holmes, where he had to retreat into the corner off of a pick and roll and was able to drain it. So that at least provides an element. But Holmes just is not big enough to play center, not physical enough, not very good on the boards as well. Like he's going to need to show more as an inside player to really, I think, emerge as a positive rotation piece. But he's going to just play, and so is Najee. But their most effective offense to me is actually now the Murray Gordon pick and roll, which we've seen little of over the years. But Murray had a number of assists to Gordon, where Gordon is, if he can get out in space moving towards the basket, still can be a very effective finisher. We haven't really seen him in that role too much. So this is going to be fascinating for Denver. Hopefully they won't get any more injuries. But like you said, there's an opportunity for them here. Like this is kind of right on the borderline. All these games could go either way, and that may eventually determine their fate in terms of the seeding. Also, Murray, I think, has missed already 2 of these games, one for rest and now the illness. So they're going to try not to run him into the ground either. All right, where do you want to go next here?
So we have a couple of games to discuss, and I think the most compelling of those was one that I focused on, though you watched part of it too, which was Rockets against the Portland Trailblazers. So you want to start with the Rockets?
I really thought you were going to say Kings Warriors from Friday was the most compelling. Okay, but we'll get to that. Don't worry. Yes. So Rockets and Portland. Let's start with Portland on a run, 9-4 in their last 13. It looked like things were really cratering for them, but they are now 19-20 overall. They are still 22nd in net rating, -2.6, 23rd on offense. The defense is shooting up, though, since we last checked in on it. It's up to 17th at this point. So they actually project for 39-43, the 9 seed, and they're probably going to get Drew Holiday back today. He is actually probable. I haven't seen anything about Jeremy Grant yet, but getting Holiday back would be huge. Somebody else was actually probable too. Let me check and see who that was. Well, you start talking about this Rockets Blazers game.
Rob Williams is, and he left
yes.
the game that we're going to talk about early. So it's always good when Robert Williams has an injury and it's less severe than we feared.
Yeah. Now it would be great if Scoot Henderson and Jeremy Grant could come back for this team as well, and they've been playing really well without Holiday and without Henderson and without Grant. So it's been pretty impressive for the Blazers, and they beat the Rockets on back-to-back nights. On Wednesday, Avdija had 41. This game, he didn't have as many, although as we'll talk about, he dominated the end of the game. But what were some of your takeaways from the meat of this one?
So it's fascinating because you watched the end of the game and not the meat, and I think there were some very important differences between the two. And so for most of the game, informed by Deni Avdija's huge scoring explosion in the first of their two games, the Houston Rockets were extremely aggressive. Remember, Alperen Şengün is still out at getting the ball out of Deni Avdija's hands. Avdija, he was 1 of 7 from the field in the first half, and he had a couple of turnovers. And now there were times that they were basically doubling him. Sometimes they were doubling him close to half court. And when you consider the players that are out for the Portland Trailblazers, that meant that it was a lot more for Shaedon Sharpe and Sissoko and Tamani Kamara to do. And, they're not necessarily the greatest at creating their own stuff. Now, Tamani Kamara, on his way to a season high, maybe a career high, 25 points, he had, I think it was 16 in the first quarter. And it was mostly getting open corner threes because that was something that the Houston Rockets were conceding. And so, yeah, Kamara had 10 points in the first 5 minutes, 16 points in the first quarter. And so most of it was, easier catch and shoot within the flow type stuff. However, Tamani Kamara, the kind of the capper on all of that, he hit a pull-up three over Kevin Durant, and you're just like, whoa, okay, maybe there is a little bit more there. And so that overall strategy, which was pretty aggressive, pretty zealous by the Rockets, I thought it was working very well. Portland in the first three quarters had a .8 points per play in the half court. And they weren't scoring well. They were generating, they had that Kamara stretch, but outside of that, they weren't really generating that many good shots. Then the game really turned, and this was the focus of Ime Udoka's ire, which I'll talk about how I think that was a little bit misguided. So what happened was Kevin Durant had played a lot of minutes in the early part of the game. He did well. It was very important to the Rockets' success. He had 30 points in 39 minutes, past Wilt Chamberlain on an all-time scoring list in this game. Was the beginning of the fourth quarter, well, that's the time, sort of like his former teammate Stephen Curry, that's the time that Kevin Durant rests. And at the beginning of the fourth quarter, the Rockets were up, I believe they were up 13. And the Portland Trailblazers go on an elongated 11-0 run. And so Ime Udoka, after the game, he was going on a tirade about how, we have to play better when KD's off the floor. He's 37 years old. We can't have him playing almost 40 minutes a night. All of that is fair. And it was interesting because I usually prefer to watch a game not knowing what happens. I think that leads to me kind of looking at things differently. This time I did know because I'd heard Ime Udoka stuff and everything else. And I actually thought, yes, the 11-0 run was bad. That got the Blazers into the game. They kind of carried that momentum through, stayed competitive, and ended up winning. But the process, what was actually happening in those Houston minutes, I think wasn't that bad. Like, it basically, they generated a lot of open corner threes for credible shooters. Dorian Finney-Smith had 3 looks, 2 of which were open, 1 of which was an amazing recovery block or closeout block by Duop Reith. And so he had
amazing closeout block by Duop Reith. Okay.
I mean, I'll talk about Reith. I'll talk about Reith in a second.
I didn't know that we that I was ever going to hear those sentences.
It was awesome. I mean, that play, like, he came out of nowhere. And just like I didn't, they're like, where did the ball go? And where was the person come from? So that was huge. And so DFS missed 3, couple of bad Jabari misses, and Jabari Smith Jr. had a weird night. Actually, this might as well talk about now because some of it was in the stretch. So because Alperen Şengün is out, the Rockets, sort of like the Blazers have to do, the remaining players have to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more assertive. And so Jabari, for the most part, he was doing that from 2. And I actually thought he was taking a lot of bad shots. It seemed a little bit, and I'm a little bit Ingram-esque, except that he's not quite the shot converter that Brandon Ingram is. And part of the reason I didn't pick him in top 10 prospects is that it seems like Jabari Smith is always going to take more bad 2s than you want him to. And so you had that. But what was so weird is so like, okay, he would, even with my criticisms there, he was 6 of 11 on 2s. That's not great, but it's not terrible. Jabari was 0 for 10 on 3s, and most of them were pretty open. The worst of them was outside of that 10-0 run, but he shot a corner 3 off the side of the backboard, which was pretty bad. That was a pretty rough miss for the Rockets. They were kind of looking for a life preserver at that point. And so, to Ime Udoka's point, I thought that they were generating good shots. I thought that this wasn't like Amen and Jabari being selfish. It wasn't them making mistakes. And I honestly thought their defense wasn't that bad either. They were that when the Blazers got something in transition, it went well. But I mean, the Blazers have transition players. But when in the half court, I didn't think Portland was generating good stuff or anything like that. It was just your shot. It was a make or miss league stretch. But it is true that that stretch forced Kevin Durant to play 39 minutes, and they ended up losing and all this kind of stuff. But it was interesting for me to know that that stretch was so pivotal in the minds of the important people, and that I just disagreed with why it was so important.
No, that's always interesting to note. And Udoka, maybe if he goes back and looks at the film, right? He's talking about the game afterwards. He knows what happened. But even coaches, especially if you're standing there on the sideline, it's hard to know without looking at the film exactly what happened in a given stretch. Now, if you look at the fundamentals of this game, Houston really was in great shape, right? Like had 10 more true shots than Portland. They had 26 offensive rebounds, and they just happened to shoot 10 out of 45 from three, led by Jabari's 0 for 10, and Dorian Finney-Smith going 1 for 7. Finney-Smith has not been good after returning. They needed him because Tari Eason sprained his ankle after playing 15 minutes, and I thought that really hurt them too. But I mean, it is noteworthy though that again, Houston has a very good defensive team in terms of their perimeter defenders, and that they got lit up by Avdi in that first game, and then had to go to this extreme strategy, which, in fairness, largely worked. That is a commentary
Oh,
on how good
sorry.
Avdia is. Yeah,
Well, yeah, we'll talk about the end of the game later, and then I'm teeing up something else for that. But so what's
yeah,
more on the meat of the game because it was pretty fascinating. So one of the other stories was how Portland wanted to run the rest of their rotation because they have all these guys. They still have a bunch of guys out, and Drew Holiday didn't play in this one, Jeremy Grant, etc. And so starting lineup was Kamara, Avdia, Sharp, Sissoko, and Klingon. I thought Sharp had his best moments were very good. He had some really good transition finishes, and he had some nice, like kind of through traffic and all that type of stuff. But he forced some stuff. Now it's different when you're forcing things and you have a bunch of your creators out. Like some of those shots just have to come. But he forced a few things. But I thought overall he did fine. He was plus 11, but I thought he played reasonably well. The dynamic that I was so super fascinated by was, first of all, Portland kept their pressure up even with the bench players on, and ran Rupert, who I thought was very bad on offense, but he provided some good pressure on defense. Good to see
yeah.
him do something positive.
That's probably his best skill right now.
It is. And so he was out there. Caleb Love fired a bunch of shots, but they needed somebody to do it. And then the backup bigs was fascinating because Blazers are so low on forwards and they start almost all the guys they play. So originally, what they were doing is they were playing Robert Williams and Yang Hansen together. They were playing double big against the Rockets, who were not playing double big because Şengün is out. They basically had Capella and Steven Adams swap for each other. And so that was weird. And both those guys can't really shoot. And then Robert Williams left the game with knee soreness. And so they actually went briefly to Hansen and Donovan Klingon. And those guys combined, both Chauncey Billups and now Tiago Splitter have been really trying to make their big shooting happen. And in this game, they were combined 0 for 7. Important to note that over the course of the season, Klingon is shooting 33% on about 4 per 36. So that's a rate, and that's a reasonable rate. And 33%, like that's getting there. But Hansen, 5.5 per 36 and only making 14%. And they all looked bad to me. Like his 3-point attempts looked bad. And there's a lot of merit to young guys getting out there, stretching the wings.
And Young is also shooting 41% on twos.
Yeah, he is. Great. I think it's like 40% true shooting. I had it somewhere in my notes. I can see if I can
I'll say this too. Actually, I mean, for Klingon, one of his big concerns that we had about him was his 2-point finishing. And playing with Avdia, I think, has been really, really important for him because Avdia just knows where to put the ball for him, particularly on alley-oops. Like he knows that Klingon can't jump, so he just puts it like 3 inches away from the cylinder and knows that Klingon can at least go and get that because he's not going to like catch it by the corner of the backboard and take it to the rim. He's not that athletic, but he has this massive standing reach. So Klingon's up to 65% from the field, or sorry, 65% on twos this year, where he was, I think, below 60 last year and was way below the overall efficiency for centers last year. So I think the Blazers being able to get more out of him and having him work, be a threat around the basket on some of these Avdia drives has been really useful. Yeah. What else do you have for this one, or should we talk about the end?
No, so Dwap Breath comes in when Robert Williams gets hurt, and I thought he played really well. He was a part of that 11-0 run, and he hit 1 3. He had 2 blocks, including that big one, and he provides another guy who can shoot, another guy who can do things out there. And so like I know that Tiago Splitter and the Blazers aren't necessarily maximizing winning games. I think, and Reith has, I believe he had a knee injury for part of it. He missed some time. Is that he just hasn't, like, I think he's a better player, but you don't always have to focus on that. The idea is not necessarily to squeak out every extra marginal win with a team like this. You drafted a guy high. Sometimes you want to see how they do. And so I thought that Reith was important for the run. He hadn't played. He basically only played due to injury. So I think that's about all for the Blazers. And then in the meat of the game, another factor that I thought really changed this one was that Tari Eason, I thought, even though the Rockets were outscored in his minutes, that they really missed him during the later stretch. So Eason, he plays 16 minutes in the game, but he leaves early with an ankle sprain. And I thought that was a big part of their second half struggles. And for the season, inspired by watching this game, Rockets about a 111 defensive rating with Eason on, 113 with him off. And the biggest difference is on the defensive glass. They're way better when Eason is on the floor. And that disparity I brought up is about 2 points per 100 possessions. That doesn't seem big, but the shooting luck goes the other way. So they've been unlucky with Eason on the floor and a little luckier with Eason off the floor. So I think he really makes a difference for them. And his offensive game can be an experience. Sometimes he makes weird plays in transition, but his jumper's been going into at a ridiculous rate so far this year. And so I thought that Eason being unavailable for the end of the game helped make things harder, particularly with Şengün out. Just another guy who can defend, who plays hard, who runs hard in transition. And so I thought Eason not being out there was a challenge. That also meant that they had to lean more on guys like Dorian Finney-Smith and Josh Okogie. Okogie was fine, but just they have to lean more on those guys. And then Kevin Durant, I thought he played very well overall. He was ridiculous, as you'd expect, efficient, 30 points on 22 true shots, only 2 turnovers, 4 assists. And it was the normal Kevin Durant, tough shot diet, but he makes them at a better rate than basically anyone ever has. And he had some good passes. He has some passes that are a little bit of experience. And then the other thing that Durant did is he had a couple of big defensive plays. There was a great recovery block to take away what seemed like a wide open Rupert dunk. I didn't even, he basically apparated there, got a huge block, and that totally took away a possession. That was when the Blazers offense was really struggling in the early part. And so Durant, he has those moments. I thought he was, when he was out there, he was typically the best player on the floor, notable exception of the end. And so that was one. And then I thought it was overall, it was not a perfect Reed Shepherd game. I thought that his defensive pressure at times was a little bit misguided. It didn't help as much, and there were some stretches late where I thought Shepherd's limitations really mattered. And offensively, he was fine. He was 4 of 10 on twos, 4 of 11 on threes. And the Rockets offense, I think, looked healthier with him on the floor. So that was there.
Yeah.
And then
he got the close for that reason. I think they needed somebody else who could do something with the ball without Şengün.
And then the last thing, kind of on the meat of the, 2 things. One, I praised Tari Eason, but I forgot to mention my favorite play. There was a play, so it's so funny that happened against the Blazers, where the Blazers are bringing the ball up, and Tari Eason basically does a one-man Blazers pressure, and he steals the ball on it was a 2-on-1 in the backcourt, and he got it anyway. It was awesome to take things away. And then the other one is Amen Thompson, and I was fun watching this game with the context. It occurred on the same day, but after we did top 10 prospects. And I thought Amen did a nice job of being a little bit more diligent, being a little bit more assertive when he had some sort of an advantage, getting downhill. He did some of the things that we criticized him for not doing in that podcast correctly. That it's not like this is a change. But that was good to see. 9 of 17 from the field. And some of those 17 were the shots that I think he should just cut out of his diet. Like he took a couple challenge threes late that we'll talk about, but also just like pull up 2 with 10 seconds left in the shot clock. Like you could get something better for the Rockets overall. And so I thought his offensive game was better. And then defensively, he was important for what they were doing, but because they were doing so much doubling, they didn't really rely on Amen's brilliance, which, that actually worked out really well during the time they actually tried it.
One other thing that stuck out to me from this one, and watching the fourth quarter, this occurred then as well. Houston, you might be, oh yeah, 26 offensive rebounds, 43% offensive rebounds for the game. Wow, they just dominated Portland on the glass, but it didn't matter because they only had 16 second chance points, and the Blazers had 33% offensive rebounds, but they had 22 second chance points. And a particular note, and this happens sometimes with Steven Adams in particular, right? Like he is just not gonna get a putback off of his offensive rebounds. Like he pursues the ball really well, he wards guys off, he gives you second chances, but then someone else has to convert. So they had 26 second chances, and some of those are gonna be team rebounds, whatever. But here's their shot distribution on the second chances: 2 of 3 at the rim. So you had 26 offensive rebounds, and you only got 3 shots at the rim. Usually those are going to generate second chances right at the basket. And then they shot 1 out of 10 on threes off of second chances. So, and then in transition, they were 1 out of 6 on threes. So those are usually going to be your second chance threes, or your transition threes are going to be your most efficient ones. They're 2 out of 16 on those 3 pointers. So that was a big reason. Again, I think if you play this game over and the teams play the same way and it's just shot making, Houston's probably going to win it. But it was close late, and that's why Portland was able to out execute them at the end of the game. They had that chance. So I think what stood out the most to me, I mean, for Houston's standpoint, Jabari Smith Jr., we talked about how he didn't make a 3 in 10 attempts for the game. He was just awful down the stretch as well. He had a wide open corner 3 that was one of the most important shots of the game with under 2 minutes to go that he just missed off an offensive rebound. He committed 3 fouls in the
Mm-hmm.
last 5 minutes of the game, and one of them was maybe a little controversial where I thought he was showing his hands. It was a straight line pathway play against Avdija. Avdija got to the line a couple of times in the last 5 minutes of the game, but then what really killed him was he sold out to contest a City Sissoko
Oh
three-pointer
God.
and committed a 3-shot foul. And Sissoko looked like he maybe had stuck his leg out a little bit, and there was a challenge from Udoka. I thought it was a good challenge to see, but also there was some body contact there as well. So even though Sissoko stuck his leg out a little bit, it still probably wouldn't have a foul anyway. And so those free throws really killed Houston
Yeah.
down the
That
end. Yeah.
that pushed it from a 1 point Blazers lead to a 4 point Blazers lead. Credit to Sissoko for making all three of them. And so yeah, Jabari and Jabari was, you mentioned the fouls. He was a part of their defensive problems. And so what was so shocking to me is that the Rockets have this approach on Avdia where they were making the other guys beat them. And other than Kamara's crazy first quarter, generally they were not. And then in that clutch run, they largely went away from that. They did double in some certain moments, but they were doing a lot more of like, okay, Jabari, you're going to defend Deni Avdija one on one, and Avdija just completely cooked the Rockets during crunch time. And Ime Udoka, he never really changed. They did do a little bit of doubling, but the Thiago Splitter deserves credit for bringing in a good counter, which was the guy they were bringing in on the screens ended up being Reed Shepard, and so that just changed the structure of the Rockets' help defense.
Yeah, and Avdia was able to find some guys on the short roll who were able to make plays as well, and it helped too. Because the thing is, Klingon, if you're double teaming, like you really can't have him in the pick and roll because he's just not going to do anything on the short roll, particularly if there's a double team out near half court. The other thing too is that Avdia is just really good at rejecting the screen, particularly getting to his right hand, and so that kind of messed up bringing a second guy into the action messed up Houston's whole team. I also thought it was noteworthy that Amen Thompson wasn't the guy guarding Deni Avdija most of the way. He was the primary match out throughout most of the game. He did end up with 4 fouls. Maybe Udoka felt like he wanted Smith just so Thompson wouldn't get his fifth and maybe foul out because he was playing pretty well offensively. But I think Thompson would just have been better. Like Smith, I think is a pretty decent ISO defender, but maybe not as good getting over screens. He's been used more as a switch defender, switching on to guys rather than the primary assignment. So I thought his inexperience showed there with Avdia being able to beat him, getting downhill to some degree. And then, you mentioned Amen. It was good that during the beginning of the game, he's able to be effective, but I saw a couple of things
Oh,
at the end that were pretty rough, right? So they get a steal. I think it was Avdia who turned it over 2-on-1. Avdija is back. And again, it was interesting that in the top 10 prospects earlier that day, I compared Amen to Avdija, and I said Amen's way more athletic than Avdija, but Avdija is just a better driver. He's more physical. He understands how to use his footwork in the lane, go through guys, get fouled. And in this case, Amen is coming downhill 2-on-1, and he just got stripped by Avdija on a 2-on-1. He wasn't able to make the pass, wasn't able to get enough separation between himself and the other player who's running. I think it was Okogie was the other guy. He was out there at the end because Eason was out and Finney Smith had been ineffective. And so that was just an example of where Amen just like not quite knowing how to use his body and his footwork to go at someone like Avdija, who he should be able to score against it in the 2-on-1 probably.
Yeah.
And then Avdija also had this unbelievable play at the end too, where there was a loose ball off an offensive rebound. Looks like it's going out of bounds. Everyone is kind of giving up on it. And I thought there was no way he was going to be able to get it because it was so low to the ground. He dove on the ground and backhand rolled the ball back into play. And Portland was able to recover. That was a huge play down the end as well. So Avdija really, he just dominated on both ends in crunch time. It was awesome.
And the thing I'll add to that is that Avdija, I thought the biggest swing was the steal that you talked about. So that was 105-103 Blazers, and Amen's coming down to potentially tie the game after a missed shot. And not only did Avdija steal the ball in the 2-on-1, he immediately threw it ahead and got a dunk for CJ Sissoko. And remember, it's a 2-on-1, so there are a lot of Rockets back, but he was able to make the incisive pass. And so instead of being a tie game, it's they're up 4 with a minute left, and then shortly after that was the amazing play you talked about before. And so Amen also, he had a couple of shots late where they're just like daring him to shoot, and he shot them and they missed. And the Rockets, I agree with you. I think they should have won this game, but I thought it was fascinating, and it illustrated a lot of like kind of why I've been a little bit of a believer in the Blazers, like preseason, all that stuff, is that I think they have the building blocks. I didn't expect Avdija to become potentially an All NBA level player. And so for the Rockets, it's frustrating to let this one slip away. They're still having a wonderful overall season, but these kind of losses they stick with you at least a little bit. We should do their stats before we move on.
So we should. The Houston Rockets are actually falling back. They are 22-13. The Phoenix Suns are quite on their heels right now, only a game and a half behind the Rockets for getting out of the play-in. The Rockets are 22-13, but only 6-7 in their last 13. Some of those initial losses were just a rut they were going through before Christmas, and they lost a bunch of close games to bad teams. And they are still second in net rating at plus 8.9, fourth on offense, third on defense. BPI still likes them to go 54-28 and be the 2 seed, and gives them a 100% chance of making the playoffs, which seems a little high from where they are right now. The Sacramento Kings. Danny, would you like to tell us what their execrable stats are?
No, but I will anyway. The Sacramento Kings are 8-30 on the season, 2-10 in their last 12. They're last in net rating, negative 11.6. They are last in offense. They are 28th in defense. And they are projected to be the worst team in the Western Conference, 21-61. And as an administrative note, somehow the formerly Staples Center tunnels loom again. Dennis Schroeder suspended 3 games without pay for confronting and attempting to strike another player. It took place after the Kings lost to the Lakers shortly before New Year's. So this took over 2 weeks to adjudicate. Schroeder reportedly sought out the opposing player in the hallway and initiated the confrontation.
And that opposing player was, in fact, one Luka Doncic of the Lakers. And Schroeder, Anthony Slater had a lot of great color on this one, that Schroeder called him a bitch after the game and said that you can't say certain stuff on the floor and then pretend to be nice off it. Tried to take a punch at Luka afterwards. The trash talking, which perhaps so incited Schroeder during the game, was Doncic telling Schroeder that he should have taken the contract offer from the Lakers of $84 million. But of course, there have been denials up and down that was ever offered, but I bet you it probably was. I would imagine that would have been when the Lakers traded for him in 21. And so, yeah, that's a good way to get under somebody's skin. Yeah, you made a business decision that probably cost you about 40 million bucks. Yeah, that was maybe. I mean, actually, Schroeder is honestly the fact that he was able to get these last couple of contracts and make 13 million a year for a total of 4 years. I don't think the non-guarantee is going to get picked up in the third year of this deal with the Kings. But yeah, that was a little behind the scenes note that I thought was pretty interesting. So yeah, the NBA does not like it when guys go after each other in the tunnel after the game, and nor should they, because at that point, tempers should have flared, right? You're in a competitive environment. You throw a punch in a game, that's a 1 game suspension, like off the floor, trying to, premeditated 45 minutes later. That's not very good. I'm going to start our discussion of Warriors Kings with this quote from Zach LaVine. And I don't recall precisely how it was that the subject of music came up. I think obviously Vivek has that famous quote about how he wants the Kings to play like it's jazz music. I think maybe Doug Christie was asked about it or something at one point in his presser, but the subject came up with Zach LaVine, and here was his quote in terms of how the Kings are playing musically. I mean, it doesn't sound good. I tell you that. I mean, the music, if that's what you guys are going for, you can have the most talented people in the world, but if the guitarist and the violin guy, and then somebody that is orchestrating, and somebody on the saxophone, if they are all not playing the same key, it ain't going to sound like music. It's going to sound like a bunch of instruments playing. So there is an analogy for you.
It, amazing. And I was thinking, we saw this game in person, about how thankful I am for Vivek Ranadive and multiple different front offices for coalescing so many of the players whose personal stylings I do not enjoy on one team, so that they are not infecting all of these other teams. And that connects with Zach LaVine's analogy of like just having weird instruments that don't necessarily make sense together and that they're not playing them very well, because it's just this amazing collection of various guys who at different points in their career, and I'm not saying they're bad players. Like, I'm not saying Zach LaVine is a bad offensive player, bad defensive player, yes. I'm not saying DeMar DeRozan or Russell Westbrook or Dennis Schroeder are bad players in any way, shape, or form, but they don't play the kind of basketball I like, and having them together is kind of useful for certain purposes, not for watching the Sacramento Kings play basketball. And that, it's stunning to see the Kings be dead last in offense, even with DeMontis Sabonis missing a significant portion of the season, just because they still have plenty of offensive talent. I think overall in the game on Friday, through 3 quarters, I thought their offense looked reasonably healthy. Now, that was helped by making a preposterous amount of their floaters and all of that type of stuff. But during that stretch, I thought that their offense was at least in the realm of fine to pretty good. But then the wheels on their defense was never good, and the wheels came off the wagon in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, even it was the last 3 minutes of the third when it really started. It was tied at 84.
That's
And
right.
at that point, the Golden State Warriors went on a run. They outscored the Kings 36-8 in 19 possessions.
Wow.
And it was a 13-0 run right at the end of the third quarter, right about when Jimmy Butler came in. Kings just stopped scoring. Their offense had actually been kind of carving up the Warriors before that. Warriors didn't quite have it in terms of their rim protection. They're giving up a lot of the rim. And as you noted, the Kings were making a lot of floaters, a lot of their mid-rangers. So ultimately, though, the Kings just couldn't score down the end, and then Golden State started hitting every three. I think from the Kings' perspective, yeah, I mean, I thought there was one play that stood out to me that, this isn't even necessarily, again, on DeMar DeRozan. Like, DeMar DeRozan has been exactly what you should have thought that he would be. Even this year, like, his isolation scoring numbers are awesome. I thought in this game, actually, the Warriors had him timed out pretty well. They got a couple of strips on him down low, knowing that he likes to kind of bring the ball up on the left side of his body a little bit after a pump fake. Draymond got him a couple of times. So I thought they defended him reasonably well. Steph actually had a couple of strips on blocks going up. But this play stood out to me. DeMar DeRozan got into the lane, and kicked the ball out to a three to a, I think it was Westbrook actually, who was like on the right wing, and Westbrook shot the three, and DeMar DeRozan, who's basically the four for this Kings team, as the ball's in the air, just starts running back on defense. And yeah, that's what DeMar DeRozan should do. He's not some devastating offensive rebounder, but at a time when offensive rebounding is actually important, you would like your four who's already standing in the lane when a shitty 3-point shooter takes a three to actually like stick around and maybe you can get an offensive rebound. And DeMar DeRozan just started running back on defense as soon as Russell Westbrook shot that. And so, yeah, the Kings had no chance of getting an offensive rebound there. Um, so Drew Eubanks is out of the King rotation despite being healthy again. So their center situation is not amazing. Maxime, I apologize in the past, by the way. I spent some time in Italy this summer, so I've been calling him Maxime, but that's how you would say it in Italian. It's Maxime in French. I really, you're not doing your job, Danny, to not cattle prod me when I was messing that up. And so I like he's shown a few interesting things. He's got this short floater out of pick and roll that he can hit with his momentum going towards the basket, and he could block a few shots around the rim. Unfortunately, Doug Christie was just not doing him any favors because they had him switching on the perimeter, switching out onto Steph. Steph was really beating him up, particularly at the start of the fourth quarter, I think it was. And then so, but I think Reno, like he's a reasonable find. Like I think he's someone that you could think going forward. He could be an okay offensive center and a little below average on defense. He's not very strong, but yeah, he could probably be a backup who could like. I think he could play a reasonable role. He's not going to fix the problems that the Kings have. Remember, Keegan Murray is out as well with an ankle sprain right now, so they really just have no wings at all. Nick Clifford is probably the closest thing to that. And then Dylan Cardwell, he seemed like again, I have to look up what his measurements are. He seemed just a little bit undersized, but someone who's willing to play hard, try to run the floor offensively, get on the offensive glass a little bit. Like his energy sticks out on this decrepit team. But again, more of a second, third center type physically, not a particularly skilled guy. Doug Christie likes him because he has a pulse, which many of the other players on this team are lacking. So, again, maybe someone who's, I wouldn't say he's not an NBA player. Like, I think he should stick around for a little bit, but again, not someone who's going to be like part of the solution for you necessarily.
So Nate, I want you, I don't know if you've looked at this recently. I want you to guess who the current leader, not that it's gospel, in overall EPM is for the Sacramento Kings.
Whew. I guess I would say Murray, but it's probably not going to be it given that you're answering the question or you're asking the question.
It is not. It is Precious Achiuwa.
And yeah.
And I cracked up because Precious Achiuwa hadn't played at all in the game until I think it was about the 6-minute mark of the second quarter, so about halfway through. And he immediately gets a block on Jimmy Butler. Achiuwa I thought he played, so he plays 5 total minutes in the game. I thought he did a good job. They were positive in the minutes he played, and then he just disappeared. And I thought it was reflective of a lot of different things. And so like I largely agree with you. Reno, to me, he seems like a backup center in part because he's not so great at any one or two things that you think that you're going to have to account for him. And that's really one of the delineations of a starting NBA big is like, can you do something that the other team has to account for? Now that can be great shot blocking. That can be, maybe you could be a switch center. You could be good in the post or you could shoot. He's not bad at a lot of things, but he's not great at any of those things. And so that usually lends itself to being a backup center, especially if you don't have defensive ace status. But I think he can do that. And considering Reno was taken 42nd in the draft, and he wears number 42, that's totally fine. Like backup center at 42, you're pretty thrilled with that, especially if he can do it in his rookie year at age 22. Now he's not ready to start, but I mean the Kings aren't really an NBA team right now with all of that. And Cardwell, we'll see. He's listed at 6'10", 255. I that's just like what it's in Basketball Reference. I don't know if he's been registered more recently than that. I think of him more as like kind of a possibility, but not somebody that I'm sure is going to be an NBA rotation. But he's at least interesting, which is fine. And Achua just playing as little as he does, is, it's I would say it's frustrating, except that I don't get that frustrated by the Kings too much right now. The guy I wanted to ask you about, and what this was not his best night, and so it's important to acknowledge that. What did you think of Nick Clifford, somebody we really liked in summer league?
Yeah, and he's dealt with some knick-knack injury issues. I thought he looked okay defending on the perimeter, like switching on to Steph Curry a few times. Like Steph wasn't necessarily able to get by him, which was not the case for very many Kings who were defending him in this game, and didn't really get a chance, Clifford, to do much on the offensive end. It took an open three late. He was out there in garbage time, but certainly was not featured in any way, I would say. And I'd like to see him with the ball a little bit more. Let him run a little bit of pick and roll. But they're just every Kings player out there really needs the ball. There's one other play before we shift to the some Warriors observations. Russell Westbrook ended up getting. I thought it was hilarious. First of all, that Steve Kerr referred to Russell Westbrook as one of the smartest players that he's coached against. Like Steve, you're really just like he must have really been in a good mood because he was
Yeah.
laying it on thick. Russell Westbrook is never really been a particularly smart player at any point in his career. He's done some things to improve, as far as like his interior passing. He had a couple of really nice lay down passes to bigs in this game. But no,
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook does not take smart shots. He has a lot of bad turnovers. Going back to OKC, he makes a lot of mistakes on defense. Russell Westbrook is not one of the smartest players that Steve has gone against.
Yeah,
And then in this game,
other than going to the best public school in America, beyond that, not his basketball IQ isn't quite the same.
he went to Berkeley
Ah,
or Michigan. But did he transfer to UCLA? Okay, sorry. Um, in any event, I think the one thing that stood out though was Westbrook after like he got stoned by Brandon Pajemski. He actually like kind of Kelly Olynyk, Kevin Love like pinned Pajemski's arm and tried to make it look like they just got tangled up, but he definitely like clamped his arm in a way that could be really bad for his shoulder. Pajemski actually kind of did the right thing in like you could say maybe it was a flop, but if your arm gets pinned like that, it's better to just go with the momentum of it because otherwise your shoulder could really get wrenched. So
yeah.
Russell Westbrook was rightly assessed a flagrant foul. That was a really dangerous play. He was just like pissed off that Pajemski stopped him, basically, which I thought was pretty unsportsmanlike by Westbrook. Um,
Well, and
yeah,
I think one of the things that can transition kind of from the Kingsy focus to the Warriors focus is Sacramento being dead last in offense is bad, and especially in their talent. But I thought their defense was unbelievably bad for most of this game. The Warriors, so they went off, they had that 40-19 fourth quarter. Not counting the fourth quarter, the first three quarters, the Warriors scored 1.33 points per half court offensive play.
half court. Yeah, I mean they weren't
Half
even
court.
doing anything in transition in this game,
No.
and
They,
because the Warriors don't really do that anymore. But yeah, I mean they were just getting they're absolutely carving up
yeah.
the Kings. They had 20 assists in the first half. I mean you could really tell which coaches have it figured out defensively by how they play against the Warriors because the Warriors still are with the threat of Steph out there, even like with Steph off the floor. If they're getting cut up, like it's just really ugly. And I thought there are a lot of plays where Steph is getting topsided. Keon Ellis could do a decent individual job on Steph, and he's trying to topside him, and Steph was go back door. But the problem is, whoever is the low man, you're DeRozan, Levine on the opposite side, right? The opposite side, it's like Draymond and Gary Payton or like or even Butler, like some other non-shooter standing over there, and it's like, okay, so your job is we're topsiding Steph. Usually they would have their center on Quentin Post or on Draymond. I thought actually the Kings looked better when they had their center on Draymond than on Post, but someone like Renault is not going to be able to guard Post at the 3-point line and be there to take away backdoors. So it's going to be the job of whoever's guarding the opposite corner to say, all right, we're topsiding Steph on one side. He's in the left corner. I'm guarding Gary Payton the second in the other corner. I need to be ready to rotate over if they throw a backdoor to Steph Curry and be right there to trap the box or intercept that pass potentially. And they just never did it time after time. And so they were just getting absolutely carved up. Like post really caused them some problems as well. Al Horford caused them some problems with his spacing. But yeah, again, just, you know, having going up against Steph Curry, having like one or two guys, like he's just too good at coming off of screens. Like unless you have a true team concept against him, like you're just going to end up getting beat up by him and then also getting beat up by his gravity. And so they uh, didn't have their cake and didn't get to eat it in this game.
And it was another game where, and I think this can be a calibrator too. That's just not meant to denigrate D'Anthony Melton's overall offensive game, but like when Melton scores 19 points on 12 true shots, something went wrong for you defensively. And I thought he hit
Yeah.
a couple of threes, but he also got some stuff inside the arc. And like when he eats and some of these other guys, like it's a sign that your help defense is very limited.
Yeah, and he's really been a revelation. He's been on a 25-minute limit. He just got bumped up coming off the ACL. And remember, that was a partial tear. It wasn't a full tear. I'm not sure whether that's going to lead to a better recovery necessarily because you still do have to have the surgery. But he's really been a difference maker, even though he wasn't hitting his shots early when he came back. They're still playing much better when he's on the floor. You know, he's just going to get one or two just like cheap little steals in the backcourt or something like that. Shit adds up. And you know, if you look at the net ratings for the Warriors, I think he's at like a 10. The combination of he and Will Richard, which actually has been closing some halves, Sam Esfandiari noted this, that combination is plus 13.9. And we've talked a lot about the Warriors and which of their millions of two guards they're going to play and how is Kerr going to side of them. Well, I do think Richard, who's been shooting the shit out of the ball, and Melton, who gives them a little bit more driving, is probably their second best on ball defender other than Peyton out of that group as well. And Richard can also do that. So those are probably your two closest guys to 2A, giving you the closest to what they really need, which is like 3-and-D wing type of play. Those guys are both undersized, but they at least are performing that role at the two guard position. So I do like that group. Melton has been a big thing for them. The other thing I'll say too is Quentin Post has really improved defensively. Kerr has talked about that. The numbers are a lot better. He actually has been a positive protecting the rim, and he's got pretty good size. When guys, so like the Kings, he was actually forcing them to miss some, and the Kings don't. Where Post is really going to struggle is in a spread pick and roll, or also maybe defending in the post against like a really good post threat or someone who's like really strong, like Steven Adams caused them problems in the playoffs last year. But I think Post as a rim protector has actually been relatively effective. He's gotten a lot better at avoiding fouls around the basket, and I think he's going to come around as a shooter. He's been going through at least he hit a bunch in this game in garbage time, but I believe in his shooting. I think he's going to be a quality option there, and teams are going to guard him out there. So I think he's actually, you know, again, a solid rotation find for the Warriors, given where he was drafted. Anything else on this one?
Take a look through my notes. Oh, well, we were talking about Post overall on defense. Like, it was interesting and notable that Kerr was willing to switch him onto DeRozan. And, like, I thought that was a statement of confidence about him as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that as long as you stay down on DeRozan, I think it could be okay. Now, Guy Santos could not guard DeRozan. DeRozan was looking like Allen Iverson when he was crossing over Guy Santos, who just cannot change direction defensively. But you know, even he can come out and give him some energy. And you know, this is the kind of team that Kerr's strength in numbers approach is going to work against because they have guys who at least are going to come in off the bench and execute, and the Kings are not going to do that. Let's move to the Mavs.
Dallas Mavericks are 14-25 on the season, 4-9 in their last 13. They're 24th in net rating, -4.5, third to last on offense, but 10th on defense. BPI projects them to win 32 games, which would be the 12 seed, so out of the play-in, and gives them a 0% chance of making the playoffs. I think 0% chance of making the playoffs. That's probably not fair, even with their notable injury status, which we will talk about imminently.
Yeah, so I was watching while Anthony Davis was defending Lauri Markkanen. We talked about it on Thursday, and he kind of got his hand caught in between his body and Markkanen's, and his fingers just got bent backwards in a way that looked like it caused some kind of ligament damage to his hand. It's actually not a broken hand, but ligament damage. So, I mean, I imagine that's probably just like stretching out the ligaments of the hand. Now, we haven't heard exactly what's happening. He is supposedly pursuing second opinions. If he tries to come back, he would miss at least 6 weeks, and that's trying to rehab it, but he may end up just having to have surgery. So this is going to basically end any chance they had of trading him. There's supposedly some optimism from his camp that he could end up in Atlanta or somewhere else, but this is it now for Anthony Davis. He will be a Maverick at least through the offseason. Now, maybe this will help them because they can get a better draft pick. This, as they everyone knows, is the last year that they have their draft pick before a 4-year time when they've either traded it or owe swaps, and that's to a number of different teams as well. So I wanted to do something that you do, which I think is a good tradition when someone's season, if not necessarily is over, they're going to miss at least a lot of time. And it seems like, given the tone around the reporting, that it's going to be this could be the end of the season for him. Uh, Anthony Davis, how they've played with and without him. We can start off there. On off, not really much difference. They're actually slightly worse with him on the floor, 0.9 points for 100 worse. His EPM is 0.4, way below where it's been. Now they were 9-9 in games that he was available, but worth noting that the net rating was not much better in games that he played. Negative 3.2 in the games he played, negative 3.9 in the games he didn't. They just really sucked in close games without him. They've played the most clutch games in the league, and they performed extremely poorly in that circumstance. If you just look at some of the overall statistical markers, the only way in which they really have performed much better with him on the floor was limiting opponent fouls, which is something that AD has always been very underrated for. Is as a big man, he just doesn't really foul that much, but he also is still able to be effective as a rim protector. Uh, and we can go back to some of the overall stats. I mean, for a guy with his role, the type of shots he should, in theory, be taking, 55% true shooting is very poor. And he's doing that on still pretty high usage, but notably lower usage than his Lakers days, even uh, at 27.6% usage. This is on a team that really needed him to create. And I think it's been quite some time, really, since probably honestly, the first season in LA, that Davis has really been someone that you can give the ball to and feel good about it, because his jump shot, without having a jump shot, there's not really a way for him to create quality offense for himself, because he's not. We've seen this in the playoffs sometimes going up against Jokic. He's just not so dominating physically one-on-one as a scorer, that if they're willing to just let him shoot in an isolation, then he just doesn't really have much else to do at that point, because he's not going to overpower you. He's not so quick anymore that he can get into a triple threat and blow by you and get fouled or anything. He has historically, even the last few years, been one of the best pick and roll bigs ever, because he can finish around the basket, and he's also can make some passes out of those plays. He's got great hands. But all of these things are really on the decline, particularly this year. Now, he hasn't had great pick and roll play. He doesn't have LeBron passing to him, or even Westbrook, who, for all of his faults, was pretty good at finding AD, or Austin Reeves and AD had a great chemistry when he was there. And he hasn't been playing with that level of player. But 55% true shooting is really bad. 11% offensive rebounds. The Mavs, the worst offensive rebounding team in the league. Given AD's gifts, he should be better on that score. The jumper still sucks. We know that at this point. 29% on threes, taken 2.1 per 36. He's been playing more center, right? When they play him at the 4, that doesn't work offensively. This is really noteworthy too, Danny. With the Lakers last year, 7.8 free throw attempts per 36. That's at 4.9 this
Wow.
year. And he also is just underperforming his shot quality by quite a bit. Right? Our shot quality, which is very low for a center, 54% shot quality, 52% actual field goal percentage. And then on defense, contesting 26% of opponent shots, allowing 53% shooting at the rim, which, yeah, that's a pretty good number, 53%, but the contest percentage isn't crazy. But their defense has been pretty good, both with and without him. Getting into, and I guess before we continue on here, it should be noted that he came into camp in pretty rough shape. It was famously the 268 pounds. That's, at least 20 pounds too heavy for him, I would say at this point. But he had a really rough offseason. Like, yeah, he probably should have maybe adjusted his diet a little bit to not gain a bunch of weight. But when you have those eye surgeries, you really just like can't move for a while. We forget that he had that. And he's been dealing with this groin issue. But he really, it does seem like the groin issue that he had last year has sapped his athleticism. He just has not looked good since then. He does have 42 dunks in 20 games. So that's actually more dunks per game than last year with the Lakers, but his rim shooting is down. So non-dunks is where he's been struggling. Now, as we look at comparing last year's numbers with the Lakers to, well, actually, no, sorry. As just looking at this year's numbers in terms of his play type data, what sticks out to you in terms of how he's getting his offense and how effective it's been?
It's more like kind of more isolations and post ups
Yeah. So
than.
actually, sorry, this is what we have here. What I put in there is actually last year's numbers.
And so, I mean, you brought it up previously, but like Anthony Davis is one of the best role men in history, and so that is his most used play type. But it is really a more balanced portfolio overall for him than you might necessarily want to see. Um, and like because he's not great at like so that idea of like kind of the not necessarily self-created but like isos and post up, so like he's hovering around 0.7 points per possession, points per play on those circumstances, and like that's just not good enough, not even close.
No, it's not. And last year it wasn't as bad, right? Posting up, he still was, because posting up has actually gotten more efficient over the last 10 years because there's more spacing, and also post ups have just been funneled more towards the guys who are actually good at it. So overall post up volume for the league is down, but the efficiency is up. So last year he was 0.91 points per play with the Lakers, which is still only 36th percentile. This year it's 0.75 points per play with the Mavs, which is terrible. And then his isolations and post ups are usually somewhat indistinguishable from one another. Last year he was over a point per play. This year he's at 0.69 points per play. And so as I look at some of the isolation numbers for synergy, they break down what happens when a guy isolates. And so he's had 49 isolations, and they've three main categories. Early jumper, which is basically you catch the ball and then you just shoot the jumper without really putting it on the floor. There's drives left and drives right. Early jumper composes well more than 50% of his isolation. So it's basically he's just catching the ball, turning and facing, or just catching it on a short roll, holding the ball, and just shooting a jumper. And I mean, he's just not a good jump shooter, but that just shows you that he's not capable of creating any kind of his own offense. And he used to be awesome driving to the left out of isolation. Like that was the one thing that he could do, is drive left, kind of take the bump, maybe get fouled, or just shoot that floater going left with his right hand. And he's been really rough on that. He's made one shot this whole season on
Oof.
driving left out of isolation. So that's pretty rough. And then forget being a passer out of these circumstances. And that's pretty rough too, because remember, the defense is probably going to be loaded up. They don't have a lot of spacing on this team. And yet, he's not drawing two. He's not really a great passer out of these circumstances anyway. So just has not been a very effective offensive player. And so the reason we put this out there, yeah, okay, he's been coming off of injury, but he's had the calf, he had the groin spasm, then he came back for that. But it just, like, he's moved into, I would say, another point now in his career. And Istok Franco put this out there when AD was traded for at 32, of just how many big men have actually played at an all NBA level past age 32. And that list is very, very short. And for most of the players who are in that realm, it's, Karl Malone, just like devastated Kareem, like devastatingly skilled offensive players. And that, was never really AD. He's reliant on his athleticism. And that athleticism is awesome. Like, he can move his feet, he's got great length. And so I think he can still be a quality defensive option when he's out there, but he's not, I mean, he hasn't been an all defense level player for several years now. And you consider his overall contributions over the course of the season. And then you think about his transition defense as well, which is usually pretty bad. So, and that's also on offense. His transition has really fallen off too, from where it was when he first joined the Lakers and they were really running a lot. So, yeah, I mean, he's not even really an all-star level of player right now. And maybe I think he could be a little bit better next year in the time that he's healthy, just because he'll have hopefully an off season and he's not coming out this eye surgery, which I think really limited his activity. When you have any sort of like a retinal surgery, you just basically have to, if you can't move at all, because that's a very delicate area, obviously. So I think he could be a little bit better than he's been in the future, but I wouldn't want to count on him being much better. And then, of course, there's the question of how many games he's going to even play.
And to put it in a different way, I think that his year to year EPM is kind of fascinating. So Anthony
Yeah.
Davis had kind of hovered on the defensive end around a +2, which is very, very, very good. +2 defensive EPM. And then on offense, this part of what makes Anthony Davis special is that he's a positive offensive player. And I think at some points they've given him a little too much credit. Like he has gravity as a role man, but all this type of stuff. But he was about a +2 in offensive EPM too. Better than that certain years, like the Lakers championship year, he was great. But that now this year, and this is the thing I think you could see a bounce back. He goes from +2 to +0.2. And so then you go from being like a special player to being like a pretty good player. And I think that can go up, but the +2 era might be kind of done with him. And then the other thing that I've been thinking about for the Mavericks is like we don't know the exact timeline yet. Maybe we'll get that at some point in the next week or so. Is let's say it ends up being the 6-week timetable. That now, I still think that getting off of Anthony Davis, it had it been possible, would have been a good thing for the Mavericks organizationally. I brought up the duplicative skills and all that kind of stuff. Is that if it's 6 weeks, if it ends up being the non-surgical route, that might give the Mavericks about a month and a half. Now it will be during silly season. That's important to note, where they could actually have Anthony Davis, Kyrie Irving, Cooper Flag available. And maybe that is enough of a window for whoever the decision makers are at the time that matters to actually make their decision. Maybe that is enough of a window. Now, if Anthony Davis is out for the rest of the season, well, then you have an entirely different set of stuff. But maybe there's a chance that we get 6 weeks, a month of that opportunity.
Yeah, and also it could be worthwhile just for his trade value to come back and play better and reestablish. If he hopefully he could get his body into better circumstances after having this hand surgery, or I guess he was just going to be rehabbing his hand anyways. He wouldn't have had surgery. So, but I mean, it does seem like surgery is probably going to happen. I would guess, and particularly if Davis is trying to get an extension this summer, which honestly seems totally unrealistic to me, given what's happened since he's been in Dallas. I mean, he could maybe get I don't know who's going to want to trade for him and give him the extension. Like he's just a pretty big negative value of contract. Now, if the Mavs want to take back some bad salary, maybe they could get a deal done for him. But I don't think he even has positive trade value at this point, Danny, where I think there's, obviously he had positive trade value at the time that they acquired him. Even
Just a
even if
little.
even if it had been a more, if the Lakers had just wanted to move AD without it, not specifically that Luka trade, but something else, I think they still would have been able to get a pretty decent haul for him. But obviously, much has happened since then with AD, and the Mavs franchise, other than getting Cooper Flag, has been totally snake big. Now, I am excited to see more of Cooper just playing power forward. Now, of course, the Mavs also have Derek Lively out for the season too. So hilariously, I mean, they now don't really have enough big men. They have one center on the roster, so it's probably gonna be Cooper playing a lot of four, maybe next to PJ Washington. If he can actually stop spraining his ankles and come back, but yeah, and then so Cooper may even end up playing some center, which I actually think could be good for him. Like I want to see him. We were talking about the one disappointing aspect from him has been that he hasn't really been making that many plays defensively, and I think it would be nice to see him get back to that some. Although I think it's really going to be more they're just going to give him the ball all the time. So yeah, now what does this mean if Davis is out for the season with Kyrie? Are they just going to put him on ice for the rest of the year? Is he going to just not come back at all? Like it seems like he could maybe, uh, but maybe it's better to just have him sit out until this offseason and maybe explore his trade value as well. I certainly, if I were them, would be looking to see what you could get for Najee Marshall, PJ can't be traded. Daniel Gafford can be, but again, like Daniel Gafford, like they have to hold on to it now. Like Derek Lively may never be healthy. Who knows? Like Davis is not healthy. He might be traded. Like so now they can't really trade Gafford for anything either. I mean, maybe you would say that they should trade Gafford if they could get a first for him, which I'm not even sure they can. But then you would say they're probably gonna be trying to win next year and at least like get Cooper Flag into the lower end of the playoffs with Davis, who's probably going to be there, and Kyrie's probably going to be there. So then you also need Gafford. It's yeah, it's really it's almost like they haven't really had a plan there, and it'll be up to Patrick Dumont and Michael Finley and Matt Riccardi or whoever they hire, who I think they're going to look for someone who has a lot of experience and isn't going to fuck up. I think that's going to be the number one criterion for them. Let's move to Memphis here, Dan. We can close on them because we have some news to discuss. The Memphis Grizzlies have fallen to 16 and 22, 5-8 since we last checked in on them. Negative 1.5 net rating is 19th, 24th on offense now, which probably not a surprise given the available talent. 13th on defense. They also project actually to win 39 games, so they'll be fighting it out with Portland for the 9 seed, 22% chance of making the playoffs. And Shams Charania had this report. The Memphis Grizzlies are open to trading Ja Morant for the first time as they consider a full reset of their roster, although doesn't necessarily look like it's going to include Jaren Jackson Jr. yet. Morant has received interest from multiple teams. The Grizzlies are expected to prioritize receiving a package built around future draft picks and young players. Does this perhaps put a different lens on Morant missing more time with that calf injury? I think if they would have just made up a different injury for him because they don't want to make it look like he's chronically injured on the same thing. So I tend to think that this is probably real. But yeah,
Have they
John Morant.
have they considered a quad listing? Seems like that's worked out well before.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we've talked about this since Ja had this incident where he was suspended by the team. What do you make of the situation with him at this point?
It is significant to have the first reporting in a player's entire career. Considering his up and down run there, that the team is open to
Yeah,
trading.
well,
Like that
and
matters.
what he's meant as well. I think honestly, even if he doesn't get traded, this is one of those let's slow play it from a PR standpoint. So once he actually does get traded, people aren't angry about it, given what he's meant to that community. That could be part of this too. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely noteworthy. I struggle to see a fit. Do you see it, like if you were the GM of any team, would you be trying to get this guy?
So Nate, I didn't tell you this when we saw each other in person. My original theory for what to do in this section after Shams reporting came out was, can we construct a trade that you would do as the other GM, like a trade
Okay,
for John Murray?
yeah. I mean, we'll talk about it more, I guess. But yeah, let's maybe when we do their
Well,
offseason outlook, we'll really
yeah,
get into it. But I'm just to think of a
it's
team.
hard.
Yeah, I'm just trying. Let's even forget about the contract.
Okay.
What
Well,
is a team?
I'll walk it through for people just so we have it. So
Yeah.
after this year, John Morant is owed 87 million over 2 seasons. So he'll be paid for 26, 27, 27, 28, and then he expires.
So I mean, I think the sort of team where he would make sense is one of these teams that is trying to get better for next year and doesn't have their draft pick, right? So Brooklyn doesn't have their draft pick. Yeah, I think he could actually be a reasonable fit in Brooklyn. They have cap space this offseason. They could basically just absorb him. And honestly, they might be able to just take him on for free. So he's got some upside, could maybe help sell some tickets in Brooklyn, although I hate considering that particular aspect. Um, let's see who else. The Mavs. I mean, I still think Kyrie is just better than him, and is also an easier fit. But the Mavs don't have their draft pick as well. Utah has Keontae George, who's probably better than him now, and also makes way less money, and he's just as an easier fit. Sacramento, just don't see what the point would be there. You could see them maybe doing it like the teams we've kind of focused on a lot of these analysis with these guards, like, oh well, who's dumb enough to do it? But in terms of just like who it makes sense for, um, yeah, I mean Milwaukee, you could say maybe, but the way that he wants to play is very similar to Giannis, right? Like you would really have to have those guys running pick and roll together, but like the problem is Jock can't shoot. Um, Chicago, maybe. I mean, they have a lot of cap space this offseason as well. And then Miami's been thrown out there as a possibility, but their new offense is not that's the one that he chafed against
I
before.
I think that Milwaukee is a terrible offensive fit. I think that Ja and Giannis is like almost like concocted to be a bad fit together, but they have the incentives in play potentially.
Yeah, and maybe with Milwaukee, you're kind of desperate for some alchemy, and you've used Kuzma as one of the main matching salaries, although they're kind of pretty limited. Kuzma and Portis is probably your deal there, and then so that's none of that is like amazing salary going back either, although it's more easily broken up. What else did we need to talk about from the because we got the mock trade deadline coming up. We got we'll do our off season or our trade deadline outlooks on all these teams. So we'll have a chance to talk more Morant. But what else do we need to talk about for the Memphis Grizzlies?
What I was really interested in is, and it's always tricky when it also coincides with a coaching change, is that the Grizzlies have been a rough defensive rebounding team for each of the past 3 years. They've been 19th or worse, but they're seventh so far. And it's
Hmm.
a similar story overall with opponent free throw attempt rate 25th last year, sixth so far. And I wanted to see what is going on. And so coaching change can clearly be a part of it. And it's also fascinating because Memphis has this unusual personnel. Like the easy thought is like, oh yeah, Zach Edey had this huge stretch, and yes, absolutely, the Memphis Grizzlies were 100th percentile in both defensive rebound rate and opponent free throw attempt rate during Zach Edey's minutes, but he played so little you can't move from 25th to sixth when a guy's only played a few hundred minutes. Like that's just not enough time over the course of a season. Like now the Grizzlies they played 38 games, so it's not going to be just the Zach Edey minutes. And it's not really Jock Landale. The Grizzlies have been better on the defensive glass when Landale's off the floor and about even in free throw attempt rate. And so then it gets into some of the players that I thought would be potentially interesting. I'm like, well, what about Jaren Jackson? And Jaren Jackson, they're actually like they're actually a little bit opponents are a little bit better on offensive rebounding with him on the floor this year, but we're in a better, stronger offensive rebounding environment. So it's not really him. The first guy that you see that has, in terms of minutes and all that, that has a statistical impact is Cedric Coward. And Cedric Coward individually has a better defensive rebound rate than either Landale or Jaren Jackson Jr. But there's also a huge team shift. They go from rebounding about 74% of opponent misses to about 71 when he sits. And when you think about it, like usually you think for defensive rebounding, it usually the bigs are the swing factors, and that's true. But I think of Coward as a three. He can bounce around a little bit positionally. Who actively rebounds compared to a lot of the other wings that Memphis has in their rotation this year, like that actually does make some intuitive sense. And when I've watched the Grizzlies, like we did that game for the NBA strategy stream, like that is something that you sometimes notice. And so I think that it's, I'm not going to say it's all him, but I'm going to say that it's an overall team thing. You have the shift in the coach and everything else like that. But having a three who rebounds when you didn't really have that before can make a huge difference, especially when you're comparing it to last year, not the earlier years when they had some different stuff at the three.
And that's what's so exciting about Cedric Coward to me is that he has these physical tools. He's a big body. I talked about that with Harrington, seeing him in person. Like he is big shoulders, huge wingspan. Again, not like the most ridiculous vertical athlete, and maybe not the absolute quickest feet, but he just is willing to. And this is impressive and maybe actually somewhat telling because he's always played at a lower level. And so he's been comfortable playing inside. And you'll see this with guys sometimes where if you're playing at a lower level and you're a wing, but you're still like the most dominant physical force out there on the floor, you get used to just playing inside more because you can do that stuff. And then even when you get into the NBA and you're playing the three, you're just used to making an impact with some of the dirty work stuff. And that's what is exciting about Coward, is that he is willing to get his hands dirty and rebound and fight in the post. And so you could even see him playing small ball four with some of these numbers. Now they would need another wing to play next to him at the three. You have to have that. Maybe that's a player they could get in the draft or by trade. But that's why I really like him, because he's so able to do these things that, like, he's not just, a Brandon Ingram, like, physical specimen on paper. He's actually able to do some of these things. I thought this is also noteworthy too. You noted in here that they foul a lot less when he's on the floor, and his foul rate for this player type is pretty low, 2.7 per 36. And it's not necessarily that he's so good as a help defender. 17.1% contest rate, which that's, kind of like a normal 3-4 number, allowing 74% shooting at the rim. But the Grizz allow very, very few shots at the rim when he's on the floor. And Edey is great there too, but of course Edey has not played nearly as much as Coward has. But opponents only take 27.8 shots at the rim per 100 possessions when Cedric Coward is on the floor. So he's just, in this modern game where it's just so easy to get physically overpowered as a 22-year-old rookie, that's not going to happen to him. And I do think that helps a lot. And, he also, again, can just be more of a presence in the lane as a help defender using that wingspan. There are certainly plenty of other players who deserve credit for that as well for Memphis. But I think everything about Coward, even if he's not going to be an offensive superstar, indicates that he's going to help you in pretty much every area on the floor that's not going to show up in the box score.
It's a great point, and he's definitely an encouraging part. And one of the things that I like most about Cedric Coward is that he meshes with a lot of different visions, a lot of different iterations that the Memphis Grizzlies could go through over the next couple of years. If this ends up being closer to a full reset, well, you could put a lot of different things around Cedric Coward, and it makes sense. Two more questions that I had working through the free throw attempt rate. So one of them is, one of the players this year who has a bigger on-off split than most is actually, in a positive way, is Jaren Jackson Jr. But Jaren Jackson Jr. himself, his foul rate is actually up. He's committing 4.5 per 36. That is the highest foul rate that he has had since 22-23, incidentally, when he won Defensive Player of the Year. So it's possible that some of those are on the floor, not producing free throws, but I think more likely it's the surrounding talent. Like, you don't generally, like, you foul more and then the opponent shoots fewer free throws when you're big. But then the other one, and this would take more time, that I considered, and over the years I've been, like, I've mentioned this, people, long-time listeners will catch this, I've been kind of mentally tracking this, and people who are better with data, smarter with this stuff could look into it. Is the other thing that's changed for the Grizzlies is that Ja Morant has played a lot less, and consistently the Memphis Grizzlies have fouled more when Ja Morant has been on the floor, and some of that is him, but most of that is just Ja Morant is so bad defensively, he's putting his teammates in positions where they're going to have to foul more often. And so Ja Morant, playing only 18 games this year, of the 38 they played, only playing 500 minutes total, maybe that is contributing to it as well, because they don't have as many of the other civs in the rotation, in part because some other guys are out. But the idea that you're replacing Ja Morant with more consistent perimeter defense, well, that's leaving your bigs high and dry less often. It's something that I want to consider.
No, definitely worth noting there. And worth noting that we'll be back tomorrow to finish out the 15 and 60. Got lots more interesting stuff to talk about. We're going to talk about LeBron James' recent surge, how that's looking on film, break down whether Keontae George has some all-star potential. That'll be available exclusively on Dunked on Prime. And I'm going to set up the sale for that in the next little bit, which will be in honor of our mock trade deadline that's coming in about 2 weeks as well. So if you're on the fence about subscribing to Dunked on Prime, this will be a great time to do it. And I'll have a link to our code in the show notes, and a link that you can just click on directly to apply that code for Dunked on Prime. So we hope to see you there in our Discord. Also, you get 5 days a week of Dan Feldman's daily dunks in both audio or email form. If you like that, you'll get our chats, which all happen once a month, including with Seth Partnow, which is fantastic to do. Danny, Dan, and I will do that. And yeah, there's a lot of reasons to subscribe to Dunked on Prime as we're getting into trade season. Hope to see y'all in there.